Okay, good. I'm the only one to be recorded. Okay. If this meeting is being recorded, at least hello. Guests
already arriving.
Okay.
And get back on you.
Oh, I still see myself in, I don't know how to, yeah. Hello, good morning there, in New York City.
Hello.
Hello, where are you from?
I am in New York City.
Oh, always from New York City. There's another guest also from New York City.
Hello.
Welcome. Hello. How are you? It's early morning. It's already afternoon, evening here.
Those were inspiring sessions yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry I missed it completely. I completely got swept away. Well, I'm happy to join now. I'm sorry.
Yeah. It's very...
Yesterday was recorded, right? Too, right?
Most of it.
Okay.
We had some moments when it, for some reasons, internet interrupted, but luckily it didn't completely interrupt the session, but only I.
Will the recording be posted later on?
I will post them. I wonder where, like YouTube maybe on YouTube.
Okay, that would be nice. Thank you.
Well, what brought you? I think I Googled you at some point, but I don't remember. What do you both do, Ala and Kat?
I'm a librarian at New York University, Slavic and Russian Studies librarian. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I vaguely remembered something like that. Okay, great. Now we're waiting for others to join. For a second.
You're in the right group. Because you sent out a new link for this in the email for.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering because it's around this time there's like nobody in the group.
This is the. Is this the second day link? Could you double check, or was it yesterday's?
Oh, I can check.
Oh,
Oh, this is second day.
yeah.
I mean, this, I don't think it's the same as yesterday's, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't scare me.
No, it's completely different link, but you are afraid that people are linking to the wrong Zoom address?
No,
People
there
are
are
doing.
some people are showing up. It's
Okay, good.
just
Okay.
all things. It's technology. One cannot be so sure.
Hmm.
Okay. What?
Oh. Does it start with 17:15, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's the full meeting. Yeah. Some people should be there, but I think.
I'm wondering if some people just clicked on the first link and they think it's the same one.
No, I think I sent. No, well, they would be writing emails to me.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Irene is here.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. You're a warrior. I'm supposed to be a warrior.
Hi, now I'm unmuted, but not,
Yes. Unmute yourself, Irene.
but not visible. I don't know why.
Well, you have to press on start video.
Oh yes. Hi.
As simple as that. Cześć.
Hello. Hello.
Cześć, Irena.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. You know each other. That's great.
We know each. We're also in New York City, right?
Yes,
And we are even neighbors for a while, sort of,
Oh,
relatively speaking. Yeah.
yes. But we are not anymore, but in the neighborhood, yes, you are in.
I'm still in. I'm not. I'm in New York University, but not at this moment. I mean, we're working from home. I'm at NYU, but working from home. Yeah.
I'm in Brooklyn,
But you live in Brooklyn, right?
yes.
Yes. So, where? Still same parts? No.
Not,
Okay.
no, unfortunately not so close to
Okay.
the library.
Okay.
No, I live
I know you were moving, but I didn't know where. Okay.
no,
Anyway.
it's in Brooklyn.
Okay.
wait for people joining.
Of course, I wrote my presentation, but my printer boycotted me.
Every technology can trust it.
Typical. So I'm just going to improvise.
You're the best at improvising, Irena. If anyone,
I don't feel like it, but I will have to do it. Oh, I see that Leszek is here on too.
Leszek is here, but he's mute. I will ask him to unmute himself.
Yeah, and Joyce is here too.
Joyce is here too.
And Alisa is here too.
Wow. You see? You know more than I do.
I see it.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi, Joyce. How are you? She's in Stockholm. She's working.
I see.
Yeah, on cells. It's a Karolinska Institute. Yeah. What is this? Cells? My cells? Okay, we don't want
DNA.
DNA. We don't want to know your secrets. You're being recorded. Okay. Take care. Yeah.
I just want to say that at 1 I will have to skedaddle to the next meeting, so don't think I'm being rude. I just have to. At 1 I will have to go, so I'm sorry to miss the rest of the session. But I'll try to join tomorrow. For now, I'm here until 1 New York time.
Which means that you will skip my performance.
Oh no, but it will be recorded and I will have to review it later.
Leszek, he made himself visible. And then there is a, yeah, you can try to unmute yourself for a second so we can hear you. Leszek. Alisa.
Hello, everybody. From the extremely rainy Wrocław. Cześć.
Cześć. Well, it was very autumnal here yesterday, but today the summer is back. It's very sunny here. So,
Not in Wrocław, no.
well, at least it isn't Škoda to be here. Alisa, a hero, przodownik pracy, przodownik. No, but in feminine, how's przodownik pracy in feminine? Przodownica.
Przodowniczka.
Przodowniczka pracy. Well, she got up so early in California. So.
But you are mute, Alisa.
You're still.
Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, yes. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Dzień dobry.
Oh, and there's lots. You
Good morning.
Recovered from yesterday. Yeah, it's good evening in Stockholm. It's 5:30. Lars, you want to unmute yourself for a second? Just for the sake of it.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
It's fine. I'm fine. Thank you for yesterday. It was an interesting seminar. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. The participants. Thank you, everyone. The Krenitsky specialists. Okay. Well, shall we wait a couple more minutes? I mean, we're officially, it would be the time, but I mean, we're not as, maybe 5 more minutes. I don't know. I discovered that this desk is actually movable, so I don't have to stand. Don't have to stand for hours like yesterday, and can even be more comfortable. Wow, technology here in Sweden, incredible stuff. Okay. So the first one would be Leszek to speak. Shall I present him or shall I wait a couple more minutes? Well, I'm asking those questions. Most of you are muted yourself. Okay, I'll give it like 5 more minutes. Thank you. Torsten has joined. Welcome, Torsten.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
And there are 4 other people too. Maybe we should welcome them. 4 other people.
4 other people more?
Yeah, you don't see them? You don't see them?
No. You know, well, by the chef, Carmen Lunko, Bartosz, Kuśnierz, do you mean these people? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Hi.
Well, hi. You wanna say who you are? What's your where you're talking to us from?
Okay, I'm talking to you from Białystok, which is northeastern Poland, and I'm a friend of Leszek, so that's why I'm here, I guess. And I'm really glad to see you all.
Wonderful, thank you. And what about
Carmen?
Carmen?
Hello.
Hello.
I study Russian B at the moment at Uppsala University.
Russian B. To be or not to be?
And I am very interested in literature. I finished a master's here at Uppsala last year in Scandinavian cultural studies, specialization literature. And then I started studying Russian in order to be able to speak and maybe do research also, because I'm thinking about a career.
Okay, sounds great. Well, I'm in Uppsala. Leszek also was in Uppsala last year. He did research at our institute, IRIS, for 6 months. So that's how we met. And he was a fascinating man. Ellen has joined us. Wow, from Berlin. Have you been to IRIS, Carmen, yet, to the Gamlatoriet, the Institute for...
No, I haven't been there yet. I didn't have any courses there, and I haven't yet been there. But I do know that that's the institute for the research, and also some of my teachers have their office there or do some of their research there as well.
Mhm. Some of your teachers, like who?
I think Julie Hansen.
Yeah, she used to be, yeah, Julie Hansen's a colleague, yeah. So thank you. Ellen, how are you doing today? You unmuted yourself for a second. Yeah, hello. How is it? How is it? Barry, thank you, Barry, for being with us. Such an honor. Barry's such a great specialist on poetry, and such a treat to have him in the audience. All right, well, we'll give it just one last minute. In Sweden, they're very punctual. Russians are not very punctual. But we'll give it another minute. And then I'll present Leszek, and then another 5 minutes will go.
As the only Russian here, I object to this generalization.
Motion accepted. Well, I'm not very punctual. I struggle to be punctual, so I was speaking for myself. Okay, so at least it's going. Writing her doctorate on Alexander Watt. I just read a brief bio. Alisa, I wanted to show her. Ventsova wrote his doctorate thesis at Yale on Alexander Watt.
She wrote it already. It's finished.
Huh?
She already
She already finished it.
Yeah. You can say since she walked out of the room, I can gossip about it. It's a great doctor. Here she is.
Oh, we were gossiping about you, Alisa, about your doctorate on Watt.
Ah,
But you're stepping in the footsteps of my teacher Thomas Wenzel, and here's his book, Alexander Watt by Wenzel.
yes, he's the real hero of labor.
Przydownik pracy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a wonderful book, that biography. So I'm greatly indebted to him.
Yeah, well, it's something that I read in this book.
Zafar,
Yes.
and Irena, could you speak closer to your microphone, or it's very hard to hear what you say?
Oh, I'm sorry. And what about now?
Well, maybe you should sit closer to the computer simply, because that's the microphone. I don't know, but I had the difficulties also already yesterday, and you sound muted, and you shouldn't.
I will see if my computer is not on. No, it's on the.
No, it's better now. It's better now.
Yeah.
It's better. Well,
Okay. Thank you for telling me this. Yeah.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. And I think I'll begin our first session of the second day. I will present to you our first speaker, Leszek Kochanowicz, who's a professor of cultural studies and political science at University of Social Sciences and Humanities in Wrocław, Poland. And he recently published, I think, his 9th book or 10th book in Routledge, which is called Anxiety and Lucidity, Reflections on Culture in Times of Unrest, which is right up are Annie, because we're in the times of unrest and talking about culture. And today he's going to present his talk is titled Politics, Ethics and Everyday Life, Zbigniew Herbert's Elegy of Fortinbras and the Return of the Proconsul. I leave the floor to Leszek. Would you like to share with us your PowerPoint?
Yes, in a moment. But first, I would like to thank you to Zakar for this kind invitation. I am, as you said, cultural scientist, cultural study expert and political scientist, but it is a little bit about bureaucratic regulation which were introduced by our government, because in fact I have been trained as a philosopher, contemporary philosopher. So
I didn't catch the last bit.
To speak not to philosophers but to people professionally interested in literature and especially poetry. Okay, I have a presentation. I will try to. Okay, it is visible, yeah?
Yeah.
It's okay, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so first, what I said, that I am a philosopher. So I am interested in political philosophy, but political philosophy and political science from the cultural point of view. So poetry is one of the sources which I always found very important for inspiring for my work. Of course, poetry, good poetry is never political treatise, but anyway, I think that there are some insights in poetry which could be useful for thinking about politics, and I would like to convince you to this thesis. But first, I would like to speak shortly about some theoretical assumption which I draw on. And there is no many theoretical reflection on politics and poetry. But I found a very inspiring paper by Theodor Adorno, which is the title is on lyric poetry and society. The essay is as always with Adorno, very convoluted, very vague, but interesting. And of course, I wouldn't like to refer to this essay in detail, but I would like to present you with two insights of Adorno, which I found important for my work. Okay. So the first insight is connected, there are two quotes from Adorno. Is this oscillation between individuality and universality in poetry. And I think that his thesis that substance is social in nature is very important for reading poetry as a kind of explication, of intuition of politics. The second category, which also I found important and even more important, however, this category is, I would say, even more vague, is collective undercurrent. He introduced this category as a kind of acknowledgement that in poetry there is voice which is usually hidden from society, which is not openly present. And at the end of this quote is that undercurrent that makes language the medium, the subjects became more than a mere subject. And of course, in this essay, Adorno refers to German poetry, but in Polish poetry and in Slavic poetry, it is quite obvious that poet is not merely poet, but he says something in the name of, I don't know, whole nation, group of people, and so on and so on. But again, poetry is not philosophy. Poetry, of course, you know that from the Plato there is a big quarrel between poetry and philosophy. So we need to have some special instruments to, how to say, extract from poetry some intellectual, political, in my case, intuition. So following Adorno, so following Adorno is okay?
Maybe we should mute someone, I don't know.
So following Adorno, I would like to speak about this oscillation between individualis and universalis, and about this collective undercut, using examples of two famous, well-known poems by Zbigniew Herbert, what is mentioned in the title of my talk. I have here slides with this poems, but I suppose that everybody who is interested in Eastern European poetry should know them. And both poems were very important for people in the late 60s because they were published in 61. But anyway, for this post-Stalinist generation, for the post-Stalinist culture. So the second is the return of the proconsul. So, of course, the first things is what Adorno also emphasizes in his essay: historical context. Stalinist era ended in Poland in 1956. The political situation changed significantly, and from the point of view of the generation who lived at the time, it was a radical change. So some form of liberalization, and even if it turned out that many of hopes people cherished at the time were illusions, still it was something different than before. So it is, I would say that both poems are speaking about the moment in between sheer tyranny and maybe mask, or how to say, more liberal, but it was difficult to conceptualize. So my idea is to look at these two poems as an explication of the role of politics in social life, as well as in everyday life of individuals. And again, I would say that clear references are to situation in a socialist or communist country, as Poland was in the late 50s. But as always with poetry, good poetry always rests on two fundamentals. One is recognition of a historical context, and the second is universalization. So I would say that these two poems speak not only about this peculiar moment of in the history, but also something about relation between politics and ethics and everyday life. So of course, these poems were interpreted in many different ways. They are very popular. There is a lot of interpretation. But again, as a philosopher, political philosopher, I try to confront these poems with some political conceptions, political notions of politics. And I found that it would be interesting to confront, to juxtapose these poems with so-called, in political philosophy, it is called sometimes political paradox, sometimes is political division. So the idea, and it is widely discussed in political philosophy from, by Hannah Arendt, Carl Schmitt, Lefort, and so on and so on. And the idea is that politics is not homogeneous, that it is something, there is like a split in politics. And it is a different, numerous conceptualization of this. And I will stay with one conceptualization, which I try to show in a moment. So for me, these two poems, especially Elegy, is about two different kinds of politics. Two protagonists represent two different possibilities of doing politics. Idealistic, in the case of Hamlet, and realistic, administrative in the case of Fortinbras. So
can you go back for a second to the previous slide to show us the Fortinbras? Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so this Fortinbras elegy is, as you see, it is a monologue. It is also contested if it is monologue or this is a representation of monologue. But anyway, it is a monologue of Fortinbras speaking about Hamlet. They never met, as you of course remember, and there is an interesting, confrontation between them. Okay, so Hamlet is politics as a struggle for ideas, pursuing values, trying to find justice, to render justice to the world, and so on. And Fortinbras is what German call realpolitik. It is administration more than politics. In contemporary terms, we would say that Fortinbras is presents something which was called post-politics. Tony Blair and Clinton, there were somebody who incarnated this post-politics. Okay, so as I said, there are different conceptualization of these two styles of doing politics, and I would like to refer to the very important for political philosophers, seminal paper by French philosopher Paul Ricoeur. The title of this essay is The Political Paradox, and it is an interesting essay because it was written in the wake of a Hungarian invasion of Soviet invasion of Hungary in November 1956, and Ricoeur, as many French intellectuals, was horrified with this terrible event, and he tried to conceptualize this using, to some extent, hermeneutic categories. Again, this is a complex essay, much clearer than Adorno, but anyway, again, I wouldn't like to go in details. There are two insights again. First, Ricoeur introduced to France this division on le politique and la politique. La politique is in English, usually they use politics and the political. So politics is something which is visible. It is antagonism, struggle, again, struggle for some values, ideas, interests, and so on and so on. But there is the other substance of political life, which is in English the political. Ricoeur calls this le politique. So order, rationality, certain order of values, and so on. So society to exist has to have these both sides. On one hand, some anchor, I would say, some order, some rational order of values. Maybe it could be incarnated, I am not sure, in administration, rational administration. On the other hand, politics is politics. Politics is what we see. If we ask what is politics, if we were asked what is the politics, probably our answer would be in democratic societies, election is blaming one politician by another, it is this kind of brutal exchange, and so on and so on. In totalitarian politics, it could be also like it was case of invasion, Soviet invasion, even tragic stories about using force for imposing some political purposes. This is a very interesting because usually, for instance, Carl Schmitt reversed this. For him, struggle is like the underlying concept of politics. But I would like to stay here with Paul Ricoeur. And what is interesting and important for my interpretation of Herbert is that these two, I would say, poles of politics are incommensurable. They never met each other. In fact, they are opposite. But both constitute what we call political substance. And this political substance, and this is the second category which is important, is a political alienation. So political alienation is inevitable in at least modern society. Probably it was inevitable always, but it is a different story. Okay, so I would say that in a totalitarian, authoritarian state like Poland in 50s and under communism, this gap, this fissure between ideas and administration is especially acute. And political alienation became dramatic, imposing on people different, very hard ethical political choices. I would look at these two poems as a kind of exercise in, it is a little bit oxymoronic, but I would say this is a poetic political philosophy. Poetic political philosophy. So from this point of view, is the main problem is how the problem is ethical political, but in a moment I will speak more clear about this. Of course, this return of proconsul is maybe easier. It is, of course, ethical problem how to find ourselves in the totalitarian, authoritarian state. And I mean, obvious answer could be that we need at least some minimal ethics, minimal ethical codex. For the elegy is how this two style of politics can be used, can be perceived again in totalitarian state, but I would say that it is more universal, because I know that in many interpretations there is a problem on which side Herbert is. I mean, from my perspective, from my point of view, these are two styles, these are two modes of doing politics are failures. Hamlet is, of course, he was killed and so on. Fortinbras is not happy man with this living z widokiem na mrowisko I tarczę zegara, living with this ant house and clock. So he is also unhappy. He is also, his politics is also failure. Moreover, there is no communication, no dialogue between them. So then the main problem is for this poem, I would say that it is a very fundamental ontological problem. Can we give up politics? Not only totalitarian politics, but politics as such in various incarnations. And what does it mean, rejection of politics? We live in politicized society, not only in the sense that people are interested in politics, but to some extent, of course, as you know, there is a different concept of politics in ancient Greece and today. But anyway, politics is an important part of our existence in modern societies. So how we can live without politics, and then what instead? What instead? And if we look at the historical moment, I would say maybe, you know, I'm not specialist on the Herbert poetry, but I would say that it is to some extent prophetic. That it is like open space for
Can't you mute this, Zahar?
Okay.
Chairman, you must intervene and stop the noise from the cat.
Politics of cats.
Zach, do you hear? You have to turn off Cat Lafferty's microphone. Zach, are you hearing me? Zach is frozen, I think.
No, I'm not frozen. I just muted myself.
Can you mute? There's one
Yeah.
person who doesn't.
Yeah. I have now removed her from the conversation. I had muted her before, but then something happened, so I removed her.
Thank you.
So
Thank you. Thank you.
please resume.
Okay. So again, historical context. Historical context is, I would say that this poem, Open Space, and it is in some extent prophetic to what became a strategy of opposition not only in Poland but other communist countries. Anti-politics, ethics instead of politics, civil society as a kind of ethical challenge, what was formulated in 80s. If both style of doing politics turn out to be failure, we should find something instead. And this instead was new concept of politics, or of rejection politics in the name of anti-politics on ethics. But again, universalization, and I would like to finish with this. We're still living in the very turbulent times in terms of politics. And again, we have to confront the problem of what politics is and how far we should be involved in politics, how far our society will allow us to be far from politics. And I would say again that this poem, especially this poem, Elegy for Fortinbras, is the at least interesting question. It is a kind of the open space for possible answer to enigma, to perils of politics. So thank you for your.
Thank you very much. You wanna roll back to the elegy so that we have it before our eyes while we discuss your presentation. Yeah, the Fortinbras poem. Can you show us again? Oh, he muted himself. No, but he heard me. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that was a lot of ideas thrown at us. Who would like to be the first to comment? Let's see, Ellen, I see Barry. Who's Alisa, Torsten?
I want to thank you very much for your paper. It was very interesting. And I wondered, because you didn't do much of a textual analysis for the elegy, I wondered if you could pick out certain lines that relate to what you're saying, just to give us a little bit of your your interior sense of your relationship to the poems. You need to unmute yourself.
Okay, I would say that there are very clear description of both style of doing politics. But it is also interesting that in this poem, the description of this idealistic style of politics is done from the point of view of this, what I call administrative, or what would be called social order. So you have to perish.
Oh no, not again. Oh, right.
The air only to vomit, and so on and so on. And this is like the description of the people trying to change world using pursuing their own ideas. Probably the best description of this is a poem by Norwid John Brown. I don't have an English translation. Maybe some people understand Polish. So I would say this, Jagory w klatce zamknięte drucianej. My memory is not so good as it used to be. Norwid describes people who on their own life try to change political order. John Brown is a hero of emancipation of blacks in United States, is an example of this. So this is an example of politics, extreme politics pursuing ideas. But of course, this politics is a politics of struggle. It is a political of antagonism, because if you, like Hamlet, if you try to find justice, of course, you are not able to compromise. And then, of course, there is a very good description post-politics. And the decree on prostitutes in beggars, I must also elaborate on better system of prisons, since, as you justly said, Denmark is a prison. I got to my affairs, and this is also a strange price of this administrative task. Maybe even, but what is a heroic death compared with eternal, and so on and so on. So this is at least the description of these two position, to attitude.
Okay, Irena, you have to unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
I have a question. I have several questions, but the first one that I will have is, but you are presenting something that, what is the meaning of this poem? This poem is not obviously a dissertation about various kinds of politics. So what is Herbert saying here?
Unmute yourself, Leszko.
Of course, you are right. Sorry that I maybe simplified poetry to find a kind of, how to say, political kernel in poetry. But if I would answer your question directly, I would say that it is a poem about existential ontological cost of this two style of doing politics. That both styles are, how to say, it is not said here, but I would say that both are necessary and both are executed at the price. And I went further in the interpretation, saying that in fact both are failure, but it is something which is of course arguable. But this poem is about, I mean, at least as I read this poem, I read this first time when I was in high school, and of course it was like the thunder on my head. But always I look at this poem as a existential ontological price or existential ontological description of doing certain kind of politics.
Yeah, you did not put here on the image the fact that this poem was dedicated to MC, to Czesław Miłosz, which was a pretty radical movement, and not always it was published with this dedication. But the question is, why was it thunder for you? Why were you a budding political scientist who finally read something interesting?
It was the thunder when I was in high school.
Yeah,
probably.
It was a thunder for me too.
I think that it was like 15 years old, maybe 14 even.
But it was a thunder not for me too, and I was not planning to be a political scientist. So why was it?
No. At the point, I don't know. Maybe it is exaggeration to say that it changed my perspective, but anyway, it was important for my perception of politics. So at the time, of course, I didn't know much, nothing, anything about politics, political philosophy, and so on. I knew at the time maybe some, Marxist slogans and so on, which were repeated in schools. But anyway, I was interested. I observed politics. I was 14 years old when 1868 came. And then I saw this politics in the kind of brutal nakedness. So when I read this poem, it was something which, how to say, show this dispositions, these attitudes to politics. And what was moving for me at the time, especially, that there's a lack of communication between these two concepts of politics. We live on archipelagos, and then waters, and that water is what do what can they do, prince. Żyjemy na archipelagach i te słowa, ta woda, cóż mogą książę. It was, I didn't understand at that time probably, but then it was one of the motives which still was in the back of my head, and finally, owing to Zachar, I could speak about this.
Well, I was, is Irene satisfied? I wanted just to chip in very briefly and say that it shows that, poetry has such a large room for interpretation, because I happen to listened to Brodsky's lecture when he taught American students about this poem. And of course, it was all about poetry, about Herbert being Fortinbras and Miłosz being Hamlet, and like the one has left and now the other is taking over, and this was like a very different interpretation, but again, sort of it shows, maybe problematizes the way of reading poetry, like in a straightforward way, always just legitimate, but one of the interpretations. Irene, you want to comment?
If so, it is, I could agree. I could agree that they both are a representation of different style, or maybe not doing politics, but reaction to politics.
We want to hear Irina's interpretation now.
You know, for me, and I would like to hear Alisa's interpretation of it.
I'm ready whenever you are.
For me, the thunder that struck me when I was reading it, and that it is, as I'm reading it to a very large extent today too, is that you have, this is a very typical romantic poem. You have a dead, honorable man, and you have a bully talking over him. And you have you know instinctively whose side you are going to be on, of course. And and this bully is ridiculed by this, you know, the prisons, prostitute, whatever. This interpretation of what he's doing now as this empty talk that we were hearing all the time in Poland. You know, the factories that are built and the locomotives and the engines and so on and so on, all this practical side of life, which has been somehow pushed down our throats, yeah? And here you have this helpless, perhaps, but morally victorious essence of what it means to be a moral being. This is what my interpretation was. And especially when I learned that it was dedicated to Czesław Miłosz, who was actually, the translation that we have of this poem is by Czesław Miłosz. And Miłosz was translating at that time Herbert and promoting Herbert, not at that time, not when it was written, but just a few years later. So it is, my interpretation was a Polish interpretation. So and what I have to support my interpretation is that this is how it was taken, that this was how it was understood.
Can I come in?
Sure.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So, well, I have two main things I wanted to say, two associations that that arose for me during Leszek's incredibly rich and, you know, for me, you know, great, rich talk and something which has given me a lot of material to reflect on. Just the first thing about Brodsky's reading of this poem, it seems to me that Brodsky's reading of this poem comes from his own understanding of the function of an elegy in poetry, which is basically an Oedipal understanding. An elegy for Brodsky is always a kind of battle against a predecessor, and I don't think it's possible to it makes no sense to me to see Fortinbras here as Herbert, because it seems to me that what this elegy actually does is it does what Leszek says is impossible, that is, or what Ricoeur says is impossible. It creates a a field within which a dialogue between two incommensurable forms of politics is possible. And it's made possible by the form of the elegy. And the irony is, of course, we have no reason to believe Fortinbras really bows down in reverence to Hamlet. But there is something about Hamlet's, the purity of Hamlet that obviously fascinates him, and that is what generates an elegy. And in this poem, what you have is one kind of politics paying tribute to another in a very ironic way. And it reminds me a little of, Auden's elegy for W.B. Yeats, which is also a tribute and a criticism, or a slightly condescending tribute to a predecessor, written with the confidence of someone who is in power now, the generation in power now and in control of the public, microphone. And the other powerful association I had while Leszek was talking was with this prose poem of Herbert's, and I'm sorry if, I don't have this text to offer you, but it's a little prose poem called Próba rozwiązania mitologii, in which Herbert, it's kind of an allegory for, the end of the resistance after the war and the return of the underground soldiers to what the poem calls rational society, that is the existing, society under control of communism. But the poem takes the form of, the gods meeting in a barracks outside of town and realizing that they can't go on anymore as they are. It's ridiculous. They have to enter rational society. And the significant thing that happens in that poem is that Hermes, they all kind of go along with it. Zeus and Poseidon, say that they'll be fine. They're basically ready to give up their ideals and live undercover in rational society, abandon their idea, the principles which they represent as gods, and pretend to be part of rational society as a way of, surviving. And Hermes commits suicide. Hermes jumps in a river and drowns, and the gods don't know whether to think this is a good or bad sign. And I think it's just a little prose poem, and it's in a different mode than Elegy and the Return of the Proconsul. But it seems to me an attempt to approach this problem from the other point of view, from the point of view of Hamlet in a way, from the point of view of the people who realize that there is no place and there is no platform in their society for the kind of value that they hold dear. And there are different ways of adapting to it. And Fortinbras's way is just the most extreme, the most opportunistic in a way. I don't know if any of this makes any sense, but those were the associations I had while I was listening.
Okay, Lars, chip in, go right in, unmute yourself.
Yes, thank you, Leszek. And I would just like to add
okay,
what
Torsten is next. Yeah.
What Alisa, am I speaking?
Yeah, you are speaking.
Alisa stressed the word irony, and I think it's both poems are ironical, and Herbert is an extremely ironic poet, and he is in these poems. You could say he is also speaking from this is the negative. He would never. Herbert the poet here never expresses anything positive. Hamlet is also not a positive. He's not Pasternak's Hamlet, so to say, at all. And then where comes Herbert? Is there any politics in Herbert in the positive, not in the negative, in the positive? Perhaps in the late poems of Herbert, the mission of Pancogito, which is the little man, but also every man. And he in Herbert's the mission of Mr. Cogito is the closest you come to real politics in Herbert, I think, in positive, not in as lesser shown here in the negative. Thank you.
Thank you, Lars. Okay, Torsten.
Yes, thank you very much for Leszek for your presentation and all the other speakers. I'd like to look at this from the sort of point of view of an increase of insight. Now we start with the play Hamlet, where Fortinbras is where we don't know very much about Fortinbras. He's just the practical guy who comes in and takes over. And for Herbert, then, there is this addition of the idea that he is, although he is practical, he's going to handle the prostitutes and the beggars, he's going to handle the prisons. He's also a little sad. He also sees that there is some kind of greatness in Hamlet that he can't achieve. And then comes this highly interesting addition or explication from Leszek that these are two styles of politics, and yes, we can see, I think, even without that there is this idea of the realpolitica and the idealist. But then it's very interesting to hear that there are in fact that there is in fact in political philosophy this idea of these two sides, and I find it extremely useful to read the poem in light of this. Now the interesting question to me is there also a real addition of insight to political thinking coming from the poem? Now, you have said that this has been a strong experience for you when you read this, and that is, of course, one thing, that it sort of gives you an idea. But my question is poetry or literature in general always just from the point of view of science, from the point of view of humanities, is it always just relegated to giving you an idea, or can it really teach us something? And what I think Herbert is sort of teaching us here is not just that there is realism and idealism, because we knew that already, but also the idea that there is no communication between the two. And usually we would think of politics as being at its best a realization of ideas, of ideals, so that the idea that you couldn't be a Hamlet with certain ethical values and then also put them into practice in practical life, that is actually a pretty shocking idea. Me saying that, you know, a social democrat will always just be a bureaucrat, will never be able to realize political ideas. And so I'm asking Leszek, I think primarily, how much do you feel that we are taught this by the elegy, and how much is it that political science arrives at this anyway, and then the elegy is a nice illustration?
Should I answer?
Yes, we can hear you, Leszek.
Okay. I'm a little bit lost in this mute, unmute. Okay, so thank you for all comments, because if we say Irena, Torsten, and Elin, and Lars, of course, I very much appreciate Irena's insight. Of course, Irena knows everything about circumstances, relations, and so on, and so on. So it is invaluable knowledge, and I am very grateful for these insights. But I can confess that I read this poem a little bit, and it is what Torsten asked me. Because Irena said that for her, and also maybe for me, maybe not with so big strength, the 14 Mraz could be like typical communist bureaucrat. But is he also typical democratic bureaucrat, speaking about highways and so on? In Poland, for the last 20 years, we had like the competition who will build more highways and highways. And there was always this kind of the discussion. And I would say that I now, that I read this poem as a kind of problem of the double side of democracy. Because democracy is on one hand ideal, and on the other hand, democracy is administration. If people fight for democracy and then die for democracy, they of course don't die for the old system of counting votes or such and such election system and so on. They are dying for ideas. And then democracy came and we have administration. And it is a kind of a generation problem. In 80s, and it is to some extent which could explain why in some Eastern European post-communist countries people are disappointed with democracy. Because we expected democracy to be like the ideal, but democracy turned out to be something ordinary, normal. But it is probably not only the problem of only post-communist countries. It is problem everywhere. How we can preserve democratic ideals when we have in everyday life we deal only with administration. There is an interesting essay by Adam Michnik, Democracy is Grey, speaking about advantages of this situation, that finally we don't have to fight for ideas and so on. We have just a normal life, normal democracy. But it is again, even if he's right, it is for the price and the danger of disappointment with democracy. So again, I mean, answering this question, I would say that yes, to some extent, I left this historical context and try to look at this poem in kind of universal terms, which is again proof of richness of poetry. We have so many different, maybe opposite ideas about this poem, and this poem stimulates us to think. It is a proof of the, how to say, power of poetry, eternal power of poetry.
Okay, Irena?
You know, I wanted to say that I actually followed what you said. It's a very great summary of the Adorno essay. And of the fact that poetry is social in nature, and that the voice of poetry is this collective undercurrent that the poet articulates. And what was great about this poem, and obviously the difference between me and you, unfortunately, is such that I read it earlier, much earlier we were both 15, but I was 15 a little bit earlier than you were 15. And at that moment, the undercurrent of this poem, especially of this one, of the elegy of Fortinbras, was that this was a voice of resistance. This was a voice of protest. And this was an appearance, and especially for a person like myself who was very kind of socially attuned, it was an obvious interpretation, the one that I am giving you. Now, it is very interesting that for you, there's another interpretation that is so convincing and so powerful. And it is true that this is the strength of poetry. But I want to say that, and especially that I'm going to talk about Miłosz and about why Miłosz did not become the national poet and why Herbert did become the national poet, if this fight is finished. This aspect of Herbert as being the poet of resistance and of the resistance from, so to say, within a certain vocabulary of what patriotism is, what romanticism is, what being Polish means. This is one of the basic points of that reading of poetry, and the function of poetry. So this is why for me it was so surprising what you did with it, because it's such a classical text that when it appeared, it was a thunder. It was a thunder, as you rightly said. But it was not against democracy or about democracy. It was not about that.
Okay, so thank you. And I think that we smoothly went to your...
Could I say one thing before? I just wanted to say that, though, to the reader...
You can say, but briefly, we're sort of running a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to say briefly that outside of the historical context, for the reader, nevertheless, it seems to me that the poems are great warnings. Even if we do not take the context that Rina was talking about, reading them, we apprehend them as great warnings about questions of personal integrity under political regimes. And I thought there was a word that Torsten mentioned about sadness, and the fact that when you're in a situation where you cannot have personal integrity, where integrity is destroyed. I mean, these poems are not about the people who have the power, but the people who are facing the annihilation of the interior sense of dignity. And this is an inherently political issue, but perhaps a little bit different than the way Leszek was talking about it. And I'll stop.
Okay, I'm sorry for rushing you. It was okay. I would thank you very much for all your comments. I think there was a fascinating. Thank you so much, Leszek, that you sort of brought this fascinating discussion and very lively. And I forgot about the time, and Pavel Niedler sort of reminding me that it's getting late in Moscow, and he actually wanted to go before Elisa now. So without further ado, I will introduce you Irena Gross, a fantastic Irena Gross. She's currently professor in the Institute of Slavic Studies of Polish Academy of Science, but she has taught at various American universities and at Princeton University for many, many years. She also taught Italian. This is passion we share in Italian language. And she's working on a biography of Alexander Weisberg-Cybulski. For those who know, maybe Irena will say 2 words to advertise her book. And her short book about Miłosz and the World War II is about to be published in October. Yeah, we're looking forward. And she's going to talk now about Miłosz and the war.
It's a very good, I mean, we had, this worked very well because with Leszek, because what I wanted to start my talk about Miłosz and was with this question why Miłosz did not become really the national poet, the one and only. I remember very well when in, I think it was in 1982, I was asked for the first time by a friend of mine who came from Poland, and he said, whom do you prefer, Miłosz or Herbert? This was for me like a thunder. This was like a shock, electric shock. I mean, I never thought before that I had to make a choice because especially after the fact that Miłosz by that time had the Nobel Prize in Literature because he was 1980 Nobel Prize in Literature, and he was much older than Herbert. There was this hierarchy that was obvious for me. But the fact is that this question, which one of them is going to become a national poet, is still on. And this is a typical thing of the Polish literary culture, that is, there's still the fight going on between Mickiewicz and Słowacki. That is, there are some people always claiming that it is Słowacki who is a more representative of the Polishness or Polish literature or whatever it is. So, but what I want to say is why Miłosz cannot easily access to this position of being a national poet. Because for various reasons, of which I'm not going to mention all of them, but one of them is that he was born, he was not born Polish in a certain way. He never called himself a Pole. He always was talking about himself as a person, as a poet of Polish language. But he was born in the Russian Empire, in the place that is now Lithuania. And he has a loyalty towards Lithuania that made him refuse this one word identification. And that had consequences for his life and for his choices. The second very important thing, and this is why I'm talking about the war, was that he refused to go to the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, though he was in Warsaw at that time, and he was already a man of, he was 33 years old, and that this was a gesture that was, or a decision that was really expected of people like him. And he did not only he didn't go, but he claimed for himself in some poetry, but I'm not going to look at it. And also in many interviews and in many, on many occasions, he claimed that right of not joining something that he did not believe in the rationality of. That is not sacrificing his life for in a situation in which he thought this was fruitless. But the thing that I want to talk to you about, which is also one of the reasons why he's not, the national poet, is his Holocaust poems or the Shoah poems. I don't know how to call them. There are 3 poems that he wrote during the war that were the poems that were about the extermination of Jews in Poland. This is very unusual. That is, there was a lot of poetry written by Jewish authors. There was almost no poetry written by non-Jewish authors, by Polish, by ethnically Polish writers. And not only that he was one of the few, if not the only one, but also what he wrote is so comprehensive that no other poet, Jewish or non-Jewish, wrote about it in such a way. And then after the war, he had problems with having written these poems. He had problems himself. He just didn't like these poems. He didn't read them publicly, and he really refused to explicitly kind of talk about them, even though he is very known for commenting on his poems in many ways. These are 3 poems that are very different from each other. And that is also very interesting. That is, they were written in 1943 and 1944.
Do you want me to pull them up, or do you have them?
Yeah, maybe pull them up. And I don't know, if I'm going to read them, then it's going to take all our time. So, but it is...
read them. It's better.
One of them is the best known poem, which is called should be called Campo dei Fiori, but it's called Campo dei Fiori. And it's kind of I think about this poem as a poem, a monument in a way. It has been written, sorry, it's also, I'm not, yeah.
Do you guys see it, the poem?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I see it.
So the poem, are you but do you see it also, Zach?
Yeah, I see it too. We all see it.
So this is, maybe I will say a word about 2 other poems and then come back to it. The second poem is a poor Christian looks at the ghetto. And as much as this first one is about the monument, so to say, is a monument to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the second one is a grave. It goes underground. And so it's very different. And the third one, the third poem is called Outskirts. And it is a kind of a ballad, a popular, a version of a ballad. And it's a scene of young people drinking and playing cards. The kind of the apocalypse is going on somewhere on the kind of a margin of the vision of their vision, and it's so it's like either an ironic wake or it is an image of complete demoralization that happens after the big catastrophe. So the poem, the Campo dei Fiori, so should I really read it?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. So Campo dei Fiori. In Rome, on the Campo dei Fiori, baskets of olives and lemons, cobbles spattered with wine and the wreckage of flowers, Vendors covered the trestles with roast pink fish. Armfuls of dark grapes heaped on peach down. On the same square, they burned Giordano Bruno. Henchmen kindled the pyre close pressed by the mob. Before the flames had died, the taverns were full again. Baskets of olives and lemons again on the vendors' shoulders. I thought of the Campo de Fiori in Warsaw by the Sky Carousel, one clear spring evening to the stairs of a carnival tune. The bright melody drowned the salvos from the ghetto wall, and couples were flying high in the cloudless sky. At times, wind from the burning would drift dark kites along, and riders on the carousel caught petals in midair. That same hot wind blew open the skirts of the girls, and the crowds were laughing on the beautiful Warsaw Sunday. Someone will read as moral that the people of Rome and Warsaw haggle, laugh, make love as they pass by martyrs' pyres. Someone else will read of the passing of things human, of the oblivion born before the flames have died. But that day I thought only of the loneliness of the dying, of how, when Giordano climbed to his burning, he could not find in any human tongue words for mankind who live on. Already they were back at their wine, or peddled their white starfish, baskets of olives and lemons they had shouldered to the fair. And he already distanced as if centuries had passed, while they paused just a moment for his flying in the fire. Those dying here, the lonely, forgotten by the world, our tongue becomes for them the language of an ancient planet, until, when all is legend and many years have passed, on a new Campo de Fiori, rage will kindle at a poet's word. So, a few words about this poem. It was written quite by accident, in that sense that Miłosz and his wife were going on the Sunday that was ending the Holy Week, and which is always the day of rejoicing. He was going in a tram to a different side of Warsaw, where his friend Jerzy Andrzejewski and his wife lived. And the tram was stopped, and so he couldn't go further because this was on Plac Krasiński. This was where the wall of the ghetto, one of the walls of the ghetto was, and behind the ghetto wall there were buildings burning, and there were shots, and there were screams, but in front of the wall there was a carousel going on, and there was a kind of a little festivities linked to the end of the Holy Week. And he was so shocked that he wrote this poem. And the poem this is a moment in which Miłosz is going from one kind of poetry to another. This is already at the beginning of the war, he is seeing that his poetry he wrote so far is not corresponding to the world situation he's in. And he is experimenting. Here you see a classical poem, in a way, not rhymed already. He rhymed before, but he abandoned it. But a classical poem, you have Rome and Warsaw, you have Giordano Bruno, and on the other hand, what is going on here, you have these beautiful images of Campo de Fiori, and you have this incredible image of this carousel. And the ending, which is kind of optimistic, because this is the poet who is going to tell us all, you know, and the rage he will have a real influence on reality. His poems after that, none of them is as optimistic. There is another poem in which he says the poet will remember, but it's the revenge, because it says the poet will remember, but you will hang, you, Stalin. But here, this thing that makes this poem so incredibly special is that he combined here this classical kind of model of this double structure of poetry and so on with documentary evidence. So you have here this carousel. You have people sitting on the carousel. You have this scene described very concretely in a fragment. It's a fragmentary description, but it's there. Now, this is the thing that drove people crazy, and actually is not finished till today, basically. That there were people who said there was no carousel there. There were people who said the carousel was there, but it was not moving. There were people who said that there is, even if there was carousel, what are you going to say? Are you going to, what are you accusing people of? And there are people who said on that carousel there were people who wanted to help the fighting Jews and to kind of see the situation and so on. This is alive. This is alive. This is the thing that this little detail of this description in this poem that looks so classical is burning. This is burning till today. Now, the second poem, and then I think maybe I shouldn't really read the entire poem, but maybe I should talk about it because unless I have time, but I don't know if this is how you want to be, because this will. But the thing is that this is a poem that is again combined of, it's a part of a sequence about poor people, poor poet, poor Christian, poor this, poor that, and it was originally, it was called the Poor Christian, but then he added, because it was unclear what was going on, the first part of the poem, because it has two parts, one that is above ground and another one that is below ground. The above ground part is about destruction, and it's about either pogrom or, but there are no people there mentioned, or kind of, you know, pulling off property after destruction. But the second part, that is the most shocking, it's the part in which he says, and that part, it's short, I'm going to read it. Slowly, boring a tunnel, a guardian mole makes his way, with a small red lamp fastened to his forehead. He touches buried bodies, counts them, pushes on. He distinguishes human ashes by their luminous vapor, the ashes of each man by a different part of the spectrum. Bees build around the red trace, ants build around the place left by my body. I'm afraid, so afraid of the guardian mole. He has swollen eyelids like a patriarch who had sat much in the light of candles, reading the great book of the species. What will I tell him? I, a Jew of the New Testament, waiting 2,000 years for the second coming of Jesus. My broken body will deliver me to his sight, and he will count me among the helpers of death, the uncircumcised. Warsaw, 1943. So this is a poem that many people ask him, what does he mean by that? And I think the meaning is quite explicit, but I am one of very few people who said it in the public. But because there are people who write that I mean, there is a long discussion about what it means. What does he mean by that? And why is he, in a way, exposing himself so much, calling himself a Jew, in using this dangerous word for himself, even the Jew of the New Testament, in the war in 1943. What is he accusing all Christians of what happened? Is he talking about the concrete situation as it is in Poland, and so on and so on? So this is the second part. Now the third one that is not usually considered, it's to be really a Holocaust or a Shoah poem, is this ballad that has the scene, which is called Przedmieście in Polish, it's outskirts. It's where Miłosz lived in Warsaw during the war, part of the last part of war. And here there's the scene of the, you will know that it's Warsaw because it's sand. He never, always when he writes about Warsaw, it's sandy. It's a sandy city. He didn't like Warsaw very much. He liked Vilnius. And here, it's a city on the plain. And it's, so maybe, should I read it, Zach?
Okay, go for it.
Outskirts. A hand with cards drops down on the hot sand. The sun turned white drops down on the hot sand. Ted holds the bank. Now Ted is dealing. The glare stabs through the sticky pack into hot sand. A broken shadow of a chimney. Thin grass. Further on, the city torn into red brick. Brown heaps, barbed wire tangled at stations, dry rib of a rusty automobile, a clay pit glitters. An empty bottle buried in the hot sand, a drop of rain. Again, this is this kind of like a ballad thing. Now Frank holds the bank, now Frank is dealing, and so on. And then again, further on, the city torn into red brick, a lone pine tree behind a Jewish house. Loose footprints in the plain up to the horizon, the dust of quicklime, wagons roaring, and in the wagons, a whining lament. And then we go back to the ballad. We have taken mandolin, on the mandolin, we will play it all, and so on and so on. This is a third poem in which this the massacre that happened, because this is already 1944, is mentioned just kind of on the side. So I wanted to show these three poems. I could interpret them in many ways, and they are very full of meaning. But the fact is that they are an anomaly in the production of the time of the war. There is a lot of poetry written after the war about the Holocaust by both Jewish and non-Jewish authors. But during the war, Miłosz is extraordinary. And what he did is still being debated. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was fantastic. Shall we have like 5 minutes break or 10 minutes before we have a discussion, or shall we launch right away into discussion? What's the popular opinion? I'm asking for opinion, people who are muted, but
I think we should continue because I'm afraid we'll break the flow of what Irina has said.
Okay, let's continue. So let's.
So maybe you take off the text, please, if you.
Yeah. I pulled out the text again.
No, maybe not. Maybe I don't know if we need it.
Oh, okay.
Or we need to see each other, I think.
Yeah, let's see each other.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask Irina about this famous question about the carousel. What did Miłosz say about it? Did you ask him directly?
Yeah, he said he saw it. It was there. It's photographed. I mean, this is many people saw it. I never asked him did this carousel exist, because so many testimonials. What is amazing.
Wait, can you? That we had interruption with the.
Yeah. What is amazing about this, that this carousel not only did exist, but it has been photographed. It is confirmed. So this is a debate about a fact. This is denying of a fact that continues. There's a whole book written about it, by a very, very respectable historian who just only at the end, Miłosz convinced him that maybe it was, and all of this, all of these things, he collected all of these things. Was it there? Was it where the two, who put them on? Who put them on? Was this kind of the trick of the Germans to do it, and so on. Mm-hmm. So, but the fact is that there was a carousel. It was a traditional thing to do, and there were people on that carousel.
Mm. I mean, one understands, I think for anyone who reads the poem, this image remains as one of it's one of the most intense images in Miłosz's work, and it echoes Auden's poem of the Beaux-Arts, where the murders and the tortures go on. So it's very interesting that people have fixated on that image to try to disprove it also. It's a site of intense human shame.
Yeah, Miłosz was saying that it's not, that he not, in his last time when he was talking about it, he was saying I never wanted to accuse the inhabitant of Warsaw of being oblivious to what was going on. This is a poem about the loneliness of those who died. But there's also a very big controversy about the sentences about the language, that our language is alien to him, and so on, because the poem was published in two versions. They published during the war in the underground and published, and this sentence also is reversed. That is, his language was alien to us. At a certain moment, when he was dying, to us, his language was alien. And in another version, our language was alien to them. And this is what I think finally Miłosz chose. But this was too a reason. I myself heard a poet, accusing Miłosz of anti-Semitism because he wrote, now I cannot tell you which version, I should remember, the one that his language was alien to us or our language was alien to his. There is a complete fixation on this. The topic of what happened during the Second World War to the Jews is a topic that causes illness in people talking about it, and I think rightly so. And therefore, all of the parts of this poem are controversial, but none just like the carousel.
Pavel Palyan-Nierler, please unmute yourself. Yeah, I think you've unmuted yourself. Go ahead, from Moscow.
No, I'm not. Right now, I'm not in Moscow. I plan to be there the next day. It's not easy in these times. May I have a question? You know, it was very interesting paper to listen. I'm also a Holocaust researcher, and it is really very, very rare thing. Maybe it is, but not unique, that somebody non-Jewish has react on the Holocaust events during during the war, not after this. I know only one similar case. It is a case of Olga Angstey, the wife of Ivan Lagin, who has written the poem Babi Yar, also a little bit late in 1944. No, yeah, she was, it is the only case, maybe it is interesting for you. It was in Russian. And I have a question. These three poems of Milosz were written in 1943. Where was Milosz in 1941, 1943? Where he was geographically, and what could he know about this? Well, such mass killings as in Oswiecim, as in Auschwitz, it was really became mass just in 1943. What was his experience? What could he know, or maybe what he knew exactly, if you know?
I should have said at the beginning, he spent, out of 5 years of war, he spent 4 years, starting with 1940, in Warsaw. Mm-hmm. So he was in Warsaw. And what he knew about Auschwitz, I don't know. But he was a witness, as the entire city was, to the gradual extermination of the Jewish population there. And this extermination culminated with the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in April of 1943, which also meant the burning of approximately 1/4 of the city. So it was pretty clear. It was pretty visible. It was impossible not to see. So he knew very well what was going on. He was also involved in some help to, in fact, he's one of the, he has a title of the righteous among the nations, given by Yad Vashem to those who were helping during the war. And though he says, and I'm sure he's right in big part, that actually this whole work was done by his brother, by his younger brother, and that he somehow helped in it, but he was not actively involved in it. He was involved in other kinds of resistance, but he was against military resistance. And that was something that so he was in Warsaw. And this was enough to know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, anybody else? Oh, there's Barry Rubin. Unmute yourself, please, Barry. Yeah.
Well, just curious again, partly following up on the previous question. you mentioned the first poem was published underground originally during the war. And after the war, I presume it was published in Poland. And I'm wondering, how was it received within Poland? How are his war poems, in fact, in general, received within Poland itself? Because it seems fairly controversial the way he approaches it.
They were all three of the poems, I think, were published during the war. Mm-hmm. I even have a replica of this publication, but you know, they had few people read it. After the war, it was published in a volume. There was a volume that is translated into English, the title is Rescue. And this was just soon after the war. There was a lot of very amazing publications at that time, after the war. This whole conversation stopped later on. Right after the war, there was a lot of writings and poems that were, and memoirs and articles that were speaking very directly about what happened. So it was not an event from that point of view. It was an event in the sense that he was already abroad, and then that he remained abroad, and so when I was started to read poetry, there was nothing I could read of him, and I was lucky to get this first volume from mother of a boyfriend of mine. So, so this is how I learned about him, but otherwise I wouldn't. But at the beginning, this is an incredible thing, that when you read things that were published right after the war, it was impossible to deny what happened.
Thank you. Wonderful talk.
Well, somebody else wants to comment, or I'll chip in. These poems were not the only things that he did in sort of in connection with the Jewish questions. We'll put it this way: I believe that he translated the Bible. I remember he made some comment that he learned Hebrew and translated the Bible from the Hebrew with the idea that, you know, those crimes were committed on Polish land. And he was like, not directly implicating Paul, but saying that we need some sort of process of purification. And I did it out of this sentiment. And also I remember maybe in Wenzel's book, in his conversation, maybe somewhere else, where he speaks about Jewish messianism and Polish messianism, and sort of puts them on the same plane. And I think like his attitudes, and not to mention his history of Polish literature, in which the whole chapters are dedicated to the Jewish culture, and that is. So they're not standalone, but clearly treating the Holocaust, they're standalone poems.
Yeah, Shama wants to. Yeah, it's you know, it is. It's true. He said everything that you mentioned. But on the other hand, also, he was very wary of this topic. He did not like to go into it. He never read Campo di Fiori in the United States because he disliked the atmosphere, the reaction of the American public to it. He was avoiding the topic, kind of being pulled into a discussion about it. And after the publication of the neighbors. And after the discussion about the Jedwabne massacre, which happened in 2000, he refused to participate in that. He even said at a certain moment in a private letter to somebody, to Joanna Tokarska-Bakier, he wrote, "I should have written a poem about Jedwabne. Should I write a poem like that?" He was fighting with this issue. He was not completely, he didn't want to be put on one side of the debate. If there is a debate of the divide of the archipelagos, so to use Herbert's words.
Or maybe he didn't want to be dragged into this field of politics and sort of remained.
Yeah, because he translated Bible also. The other reason why he translated Bible was because his wife was sick. You know, we cannot really kind of pull this whole issue out of his life as something that he really worked on. He had a moral reaction to what he saw, and he wrote down that moral reaction. He then was saying always that Campo de Fiori was a poem that was dragged out of him by the moment. That if he didn't go by the tram and so that he wouldn't have written it, and that the tram didn't stop, and they had an hour to stay there with his wife and look at this, that he wouldn't have written it. And he repeated it. He repeated it many times. So he really didn't want for people to do what I did now. That is to pull it out and show it as something, as a whole. But I see it as a monument, a grave, and then some kind of a wake. I have this in my head, and it's not my fault. So he impressed it on me.
But you said something, I don't want to steal the show just because I'm unmuted, but you said before, I'm sort of tempted to, in the second poem you said you have a clear interpretation, but what's your you want to specify it?
I think that when he says, "I'm afraid I will be counted among the helpers of death," the uncircumcised. I don't know how you want to interpret it differently. But he modifies it a little bit by this, a Jew of the New Testament saying, "This is us," that I am a brother of the Jews. This is not, we are not alien. There are those who are circumcised and there are those who are uncircumcised. But the uncircumcised are the helpers of death.
Gotcha. Thank you.
This is. I'm sorry to be so simplistic, but
no, it's good. It's good to spell things out. Otherwise, we're in the dark.
I think there is. Since there's so much effort of obfuscating all of this, I think that unless somebody has some other interpretation, I'm sticking to mine. Yes, Ellen has, I think.
There's something which slightly escapes me, and I'm just thinking about Venslova's action of being the first person to write an essay about Lithuania and responsibility during the Holocaust. And he has a poem that is kind of ambiguous also about the ghetto, but I think moreover the essay that he writes about Lithuanian participation is crucial for his own participation in this topic also a question of guilt of the Lithuanians, but he doesn't seem to have seen that as being put in a position that he doesn't feel comfortable of assuming. And when you speak about Miłosz's hesitation about it, there's something that slightly escapes me in terms of where this hesitation comes from.
The hesitation comes from the fact that both in the case of Lithuanians and in the case of Poles, the Poles and Lithuanians were victims. They were, their suffering was enormous. And therefore turning so clearly, this is again my interpretation, turning so clearly against the people who are victims is very, very difficult. Because then, you know, people always say, oh, there was a death penalty for helping Jews, or there was a, yeah, we didn't have to eat. There are, this is one of the debates that is now also at the forefront. There is a big revival, and I recommend for you, those who are interested, to kind of look at it. There's a big revival of the Holocaust studies in Lithuania, though much less, but especially in Poland. In Poland, there are a generation, almost 2 generations now, of new scholars who are working on it and who are publishing and who are approaching it in a different way, as if liberated from this duty of remembering our dead. And they are writing about it in a new way. Maybe this new way is a little bit similar to the way that was right after the war, because it is much more open and not afraid of consequences, or less afraid of the consequences. Because there is, on the other hand, there is the big growth of nationalism. And the nationalism in Poland is the nationalism of a victim, of somebody who is innocent because victimized. So this is, I feel that Venclova couldn't really put himself on one side, because that puts you out of a certain conversation with your nation that has also some very valid points. And also, you know, you are writing within this tradition, you are imbued with this, you cannot really turn against, and this is polarized in such a way that if you I'm sorry for this suddenly, if you are putting yourself on one side here, you are really alienating your compatriots. I don't even want to say your readers, but you know, your friends and your family.
But I think probably what you're saying, though, the generational difference where the since Thomas was really a post-war generation, that this gave him a different sense of freedom to write his famous essay than Miłosz's position.
Yeah, I read recently, I mean, a few years ago, I read, maybe because of the book, of the conversation, I read this text of the Jews in Lithuania, this revolutionary text of Venclova, that now is a little bit embarrassing. You know, if he would write something now, it would be. But I remember what an impression it made when he was written, how revolutionary it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was an amazing and incredibly courageous text, and but he was abroad. He was abroad. Yeah.
No, I think he wasn't yet abroad when he wrote that.
Really?
I don't think he was. I have to double check the date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, and you sort of
Shama was asking a question.
Thank you. I couldn't see, I cannot see everyone. Where is Shama?
I'm here.
Okay, I don't see you. Unmute yourself.
I
Yeah.
already did, Zahar. Thank you. You partly already answered the question. Thank you very much for the presentation, which was very interesting. I was thinking about the Christ figure, because we have a Jesus who didn't, his second coming, but he didn't come. So I was wondering about the Jesus and the Jew and the uncircumcised person. So yeah, but you answered part of this already. So, but could you put the Jesus figure into your interpretation?
You know, I know Miłosz was very religious.
Mm-hmm.
He was religious throughout his life. He was brought up as a Catholic, of course, and he was. He had a period in which he was a little bit less observant, but for most of his life he was very observant, to that extent that he was going on Sunday to church, especially every Sunday, especially when he came back to Poland. So when he is saying that, you know, waiting for 2,000 years for the coming of Jesus, I would take it literal,
mm-hmm.
in a literal way. I mean, this is how he interprets. I wouldn't say this is a poetic expression. I would say it's a theological expression.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, shall we take a break? I wanted to, just a quick question. At the beginning you said, juxtapose Herbert and Miłosz, said one is national poet, one didn't make it because he treated Jewish subjects in a particular way. Did Herbert ever treat this topic?
Herbert wrote, Alisa will know better, but I remember one poem that he wrote, which was about the rabbi from Wrocław, yes?
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, I don't remember him approaching this topic. He is a national poet because he is he embraced the military side, to put it very shortly, a military victory in death version of Polish patriotism. The sacrifice, you have to sacrifice oneself for the country, or be ready to sacrifice. And that is what he writes about in his poetry. And this is how I read it right from the very beginning. And you know, he is a great poet with an incredible capacity of writing. Writing in a way that is absorbed by the people. And he wrote, especially, he became a national hero, especially in this volume of written during the martial law in 1981. I think this is, I'm feeling a little bit awkward talking about Herbert with Alisa here.
We'll give her a chance. Okay, guys.
The only thing I wanted to say just very quickly is that it's interesting that Herbert's poem, Pan Kogito Szuka Rady, you know, Mr. Kogito Seeks Advice, which is a sort of general poem of mourning and the reflection on the loss of the Jewish wisdom in Poland, that it was printed in Gazeta Wyborcza, you know, on the anniversary, on that day when in Jedwabne, you know, the president acknowledged the Polish responsibility and complicity in Jedwabne. So it was an important moment in a sense to see that part of Herbert, you know, publicly, you know, to have his voice be part of the Jedwabne discussion in that way. That's all.
What's the name of the poem?
It's called Mr. Cogito Seeks Advice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay, thank you very much. Let's have 10-minute break. Now it's 38 minutes, so let's reconvene at 48. We're very much past the schedule, and then we'll give Pavel the precedence because he needs to take the flight tomorrow, and then Alisa will talk the last. She kindly agreed to do that. Okay, 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Захар, а сколько людей знает? Алло?
Сколько людей знает? Нет, я еще здесь, я просто отключил свое видео. Сколько людей знает что?
По-русски.
Ну, сколько людей знает?
Ну, неважно, я могу попробовать это, но это, конечно, плохое, мне не надо было браться на английскую версию, но я не понимал, как бы это, что я думал, что это двуязычное что-то, ну, значит, я ошибся. То есть людей, которые по-русски понимают, здесь, ну, раздвоят.
Нет, ну, большинство, я думаю, что понимает большинство.
Давай спросим тогда.
Давайте, я сейчас напишу всем чат. Вот у меня есть такая option to everybody. Только я вот сейчас почему-то вам пишу. Вот.
Я понимаю. Я понимаю.
Мы знаем.
Послушаю по-русски.
Everyone. I need to write everyone. I don't know. Hope lost. Everyone publicly. Who does not understand Russian? Pavel has prepared his talk in Russian. Is that a problem? Okay.
You sent that privately. You have to click see where it's blue.
Yeah.
Down.
Where? Okay. Okay. Here.
Yeah, click that. There. Now you should be able to. There should be like an everyone or something. Because right now you have it just on.
Here is. You see. Wait a second. Here's everybody publicly. I don't know. Chat.
Wait, you're setting who he can talk to.
Yeah, well, I want to write to everyone publicly, but I don't know how to do that.
Try going to the chat, click the blue drop down again.
Yeah.
To the blue one to the left. Yeah, there. And then click on his name again.
Everyone.
Yeah, there you go. Now I
thank you.
Because you were setting who he can talk to.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good.
Zach.
Yes.
This is Ellen calling.
Yeah.
I wonder, I don't speak Russian, unfortunately. I feel very bad about that. Is there any, there's no two-channel fashion of working with this, meaning that can people who speak Russian listen to him in Russian, and can you translate somehow for people who are on a different channel? Do you know if there's a technical way to do that?
I don't think so. I could try translate Павел, я могу попробовать просто сходу перевести, если хотите. И вас не слышу. Давайте я так попробую. Вот я вас не слышу. Включите, да, вот.
Ну, хорошо, Захар, давай так сделаем, да.
Хорошо.
Потому что я тогда сделаю коротко, ну, сокращу, чтобы было время. Я как раз очень большой поклонник регламента, да.
Молодец, извиняюсь. Все, я на секунду удалюсь. Пока-пока.
Zach?
Is that Ellen?
That's me, still me. What form is Pavel's paper in? Is it written down or is he going to speak extemporize?
I think it's written down, yes.
No, it is written down, but it is not, it is a draft. Let us tell it so.
It's a draft.
It's a draft in Russian. I'll try to interpret to the best of my abilities.
Okay.
But I need a break. See you in 5 minutes.
Okay, good, bye.
может быть, вы тогда мне пришлете, Павел, ваш черновик, чтобы у меня было на что. А с другой стороны, я не могу смотреть все равно.
Ну, конечно, конечно. Ну, я буду, как бы, перейду на режим максимальной гуманности.
Спасибо, спасибо. Симпровизируем.
Да, ну, наверное, так лучше. Спасибо. Я как-то полагал, что раз такая тема, то это не может не быть, в том числе не по-русски. Наивно.
Вот. Ну вот Эллен Хинси, она сделала книгу, вышла в 17-м году, бесед с Томасом Венсло. Очень хорошая книга, толстая такая, интервью. То есть она, в общем, большой специалист, она поэт тоже, но вот русскую не знает при этом.
Ну да, да, я как-то... Я не понимал, они все время что-то хотели по-английски, я не понимал, зачем. Ну ладно, вот, хорошо.
Но Ирена понимает по-русски.
Да?
Конечно, наверняка.
Вот чуть-чуть, конечно. И Ларс понимает, он даже переводил Льва Рубинштейна.
Это уже, да, это можно у него спрашивать, если я забуду, какое слово что значит.
Okay. Well, we're going to be next. Paper is going to be presented in Russian, but I'll try to interpret it. Oh, someone has written to me. Yeah. Good. I will try to interpret it. Real time, in real time. No worries. Okay, but I need a sip of something, of elixir of replying. But there was of course a poem you made me think of, Refugee Blues by W.H. Auden. It was not exactly a Holocaust poem, but, well, it was a Holocaust poem. It was about the ship that was returned back from America to go.
Which poem you say?
1939 poem, Refugee Blues by W.H. Auden. Well, it is all virtual, but I somehow, from yesterday to today, I had this feeling that I could show you, but thinking of Irene, I will show you some books in my office or discuss them, but there's still this sensation of being in the same place, although...
Yes. I feel that it has some kind of I have to learn still to show things and plan it. I'm sorry, I just dumped on you these copies of the poems in such a way. I should have put it separately and so on. I'm learning this, but I think there is some kind of intimacy in this. And Lars, did you hear me? Could you hear me? Was I clear?
Lars. Yes. Well, not all. I'm sorry to say, but maybe it's my computer, my ears. Sorry.
Maybe you could use some headphones, Lars.
Yeah. I don't have that.
But you heard me.
Yeah,
Alisa, you heard me? Did you? Yeah.
Thank you. Well, no, I got most of it. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I tried. I really tried. But maybe my computer is also collaborating with your computer.
Okay, I think we're gonna resume. We're gonna have to resume, and we're gonna Pavel Palan, Nerler is his writing pseudonym. He's a poet, philologist, has a degree in geology, very sort of Renaissance man. But he also, he's a professor at a higher school of economics, but he's director of Mandelstam Center. And in Brodsky's archives, I read some letters that Pavel sent about the foundation back in the, I don't know, 92, 93, well, a long time ago. And he's a widely published writer, winner of several prestigious awards in Russia. And so here's your floor. He's going to talk about Mandelstam, conversation with interrogator.
Спасибо. Сейчас, а я включил свой микрофон?
Да, мы вас слышим. We can hear you.
Я приношу извинения за вот эти неудобства. Я не осознавал на предварительной стадии, что это не двуязычная конференция.
I'm very sorry for the inconvenience because I didn't quite realize that this wasn't a bilingual conference.
И заглавие моего доклада восходит к знаменитому стихотворению Маяковского «Разговор с фининспектором о поэзии».
And the title of my presentation is a paraphrase of a famous poem by Mayakovsky, which is a conversation with a taxman about poetry. And here is a variation of conversation interrogator about poetry.
В котором поэт объясняет этому самому фининспектору, какое важное дело поэзия, какое феноменально важное даже, как бы, что такое стихи, ну, в таком в ироническом, конечно, ключе, и противопоставляет себя вот такому чисто фискальному подходу к ремеслу поэта.
In Mayakovsky's poem, the poet tries to explain to taxman the worth of poetry. It's an ironic poem, and sort of he challenges a very pragmatic interpretation, or sort of materialist interpretation of poetry.
Ну а кто же такой следователь, в кабинете которого происходит допрос поэта, ну, в соответствующей части следственного изолятора, тюрьмы?
So who is this person of interrogator who interrogates the poet in a certain part of the prison?
Он тоже инспектор, он тоже, но не финансовый, а политический. И он выразитель как раз того, что в названии нашей конференции обозначено словом «власть».
So he's also an inspector, so in Russian it's the same play and the same word, inspector. He's also purveyor of... повторите еще раз последнюю фразу.
И он как раз выразитель, носитель того обозначения, той силы, которая в названии конференции обозначена как власть, power.
So he's a representative of that force which is associated with political power in the title of this symposium.
Осип Мандельштам был 4 раза в тюрьме.
Осип Мандельштам, according to Brodsky, the greatest Russian 20th century poet, spent 4 times in prison, was arrested 4 times.
О первых 2 случаях мы не будем говорить вовсе. Это было в 1920 году в Феодосии в Крыму и в Батуми в Грузии. И там не было никакого разговора, не было никакого допроса.
The first 2 arrests are not so, we're not going to talk about them because this happened in the 20s in Crimea, and there were no conversation and no interrogation.
А вот 3-й и 4-й аресты, состоявшиеся в 1934 и в 1938 году, дают нам пищу для размышлений.
В 1934-38.
Да.
But the 2 interrogations that took place
Two arrests. 2 ареста.
Yeah, 2 arrests, respectively in 1934 and 1938. These are going to be the subject of our conversation.
13-го, в ночь с 13 на 14 мая Мандельштама арестовали, и 18 мая он встретился на допросе со своим следователем.
So during the night, the arrests took place during the night, from the 13th to the 14th of May, 1934, Mandelstam was arrested, and on 4 days later, on May 18, he had this conversation with his interrogator. I'm very sorry, a very quick announcement. Alisa asked to postpone her talk till tomorrow, so we'll have Pavel's conversation and then a discussion, and then the rest will kind of fit into the schedule tomorrow. I will take care of that. Let's go back to Pavel.
Его следователем был Николай Христофорович Шиваров, болгарский революционер, который называл своего как бы визави, своего подследственного на болгарский лад не Эмильевич, а Емельевич.
Николай Христофорович, what was his name?
Николай Христофорович Шиваров был его следователем. Больше ничего не надо. Не важно, что он был болгарин, не суть.
Okay, this was the name of the interrogator.
И речь шла, весь допрос строился вокруг стихотворения Мандельштама антисталинского, так называемой эпиграммы, которую Мандельштам сразу же признал и записал своей рукой в протоколе.
This is fascinating. He's probably the first person to know about it because he's worked on the archives. Well, he's saying that the whole conversation circled around the poem, this so-called, which is known in Mandelstam studies as the epigram to Stalin, which the authorship was acknowledged immediately by Mandelstam, and not only Mandelstam even transcribed the entire poem in his own hand.
Благодаря чему мы имеем в распоряжении совершенно уникальный автограф этого стихотворения Мандельштамовского, написанный самим Мандельштамом вот в этой обстановке, в обстановке допроса.
And as a result, we have this absolutely unique autograph of this poem being transcribed in this unique unprecedented circumstances of police interrogation.
Стихотворение я прочту, переводить его не надо. Многие знают его и по-русски, а те, кто знает по-английски, тоже, наверное, знают, но пусть оно прозвучит.
If you would like to read it now in Russian, we're not going to translate it. It's been translated many times. and you can find it online.
Мы живем под собою, не чуя страны, наши речи за 10 шагов не слышны, а где хватит на пол разговорца, там припомнят кремлевского горца. Его пальцы, как толстые черви, жирны, а слова, как пудовые гири, верны. Тараканьи сверкают глазища, и сияют его голенища. А вокруг него сброд тонкошеих вождей, он играет услугами полулюдей, кто свистит, кто мяучит, кто хнычет, он один лишь бабачит и тычет, как подкову дарит за указом указ, кому в пах, кому в лоб, кому в бровь, кому в глаз, что не казнь у него, то малина, и широкая грудь осетина. Мы не будем разбирать это стихотворение, его поэтику, его политику, его стилистику. Мы не будем также вдаваться в то, кому он читал эти стихи, автор, кому не читал. Мы поговорим о том, что касается темы поэзия в этом. Ну, мы поставим точку, я потом скажу. Мы не будем говорить.
Okay, we're not going to analyze these poems stylistically, poetically. We're not going to discuss whom it was addressed, and this has been done many times. Claire Kavanagh and other people have written about it.
Ну, не она одна, многие. И сейчас в последнее время целый бум статей, посвященных этому стихотворению, его смыслам. Но смысл здесь, все-таки я скажу, он очень прямой. Это стихотворение пощечина. Это стихотворение, прямое высказывание Мандельштама Сталину о том, что он, вернее мы живем под собой ничьей страны, думает о нем.
So, Pavel has just said that it wasn't not only Claire Kavanagh, there are dozens of people, and nowadays it's very popular to write about this poem, to interpret it. His interpretation very straightforward. This is a sort of a slap on the face of Stalin, this omnipotent despot. And from the point of view of we sort of the people, what we think of him.
Поэтому следователь Николай Шиваров определил жанр этого произведения не как эпиграмму, а как террористический акт, как пасквиль.
So therefore, the interrogator Nikolai Shivarov interpreted its genre not as an epigram, but as a terrorist attack, as a blasphemous. Well, blasphemy is from religion. He didn't say blasphemy. It's a different word. When you, I know, calumnia. Come si dice, Irena, in English? I have the words in Italian now.
Calumny.
Yeah, calumny, yeah. Or Verleumdung in German, the first phrase in Kafka. Jemand musste Josef K. verleumdet haben. Okay.
Пасквиль, да? Пасквиль или пасквиль.
Yeah. Okay.
Между прочим, также примерно воспринимали эти стихи и многие из тех, кто слышал их от самого Мандельштама. Ну вот, например, Пастернак.
But this interrogator was not alone. This way, the poem was also interpreted by those who had heard the poem. For example, Pasternak himself thought that this was amounted to this calumny or to terrorist, well, maybe not to terrorist act, but...
Нет, террористический акт, как акт теракта, да.
Пастернак тоже так думал.
Нет, он не так говорил. Он говорил так, когда ему Мандельштам прочел. То, что вы мне прочли, не имеет никакого отношения к литературе и поэзии. Это не литературный факт, это акт самоубийства.
So Pasternak comments was that it has nothing to do with literature. What you just read to me, it's an act of suicide.
Да, а вот Сталину, как ни странно, стихотворение понравилось.
But strangely enough, Stalin enjoyed the poem. He liked the poem.
Этот неожиданный тезис подтверждается всей последующей судьбой Мандельштама.
This unexpected assumption is confirmed by the entire fate of Mandelstam, but by everything that followed.
В общем-то, репрессии, которым подвергся Мандельштам после этого ареста, после того, как это стихотворение стало известным НКВД, были, в общем-то, мягкими.
All the reprisals against Mandelstam in connection with this poem were relatively extremely mild.
Не расстрел, а в это время, в 1934 году, расстреливали достаточно широко, не принудительные работы на строительстве канала, там, какого-нибудь канала, а 3 года ссылки.
Not a death by a fire squad, which was very easily given sentence by 1934. No forced labor on a building of some canal where lots of people died, but just a confinement, 3 years of confinement.
Сталин строил свое экспериментальное государство, построенное на страхе и на ужасе перед государством, перед ним.
Stalin was building his construction, his state on the idea of terror of the state. Еще раз повторите фразу, я ее, по-моему, не так перевел.
Сталин выстраивал государство, построенное, основанное на страхе. Все.
Stalin constructed a state based on fear and terror.
И стихотворение это доказывало или показывало Сталину, что он в этом преуспел, что он этого достиг. Мы живем под собою, не чуя страны.
And this poem, strangely enough, confirmed to Stalin that he was on the right course. And Pavel just quoted one line of the poem, that we live disconnected from the country, or unfeeling the country. It's difficult to translate Mandelstam on the spot, but okay, carry on.
Мандельштама в этот раз Шеваров допрашивал 3 раза.
This time around, Shivarov, the interrogator, interrogated him 3 times.
18, 19 и 25 мая.
On the 18th, 19th, on 25th of May.
Да, и 25 мая. И все то, что Мандельштам наговорил следователю, заставляло его думать, что приговор, который ему порекомендуют, который ему, следователю, порекомендует в обвинительном заключении написать его начальство, а тогда был Егода был начальником НКВД, будет суровым. Так он предполагал. И сделал очень такое как бы жесткое обвинительное заключение.
The interrogator, from all that Mandelstam had confessed, made a conclusion that the punishment would be very severe, and his recommendation to his chief who at the time was the chief of the NKVD, Yegoda. That would be the punishment that would be meted out would be extremely severe, and that was the type of punishment he recommended.
Тем более, что Мандельштам был необычайно кооперативен, всячески помогал следователю составить жесткое обвинительное заключение против себя.
Especially since Mandelstam proved to be very cooperative and was helping his interrogator to make this very damning condemnation or damning conclusion.
Вот Шеваров спрашивает Мандельштама: выражает ли ваш контрреволюционный пасквиль «Мы живем» только ваше Мандельштама восприятие и отношения, или он выражает восприятие и отношения какой-то социальной группы?
So, interrogator asks, is this contra-revolutionary calumnious statement, does it express only your particular view, or does it express a view of some social strata or some group of people?
Сугубо юридически этот вопрос означает, не хотите ли к своей статье 58 пункт 10 добавить еще и 58 пункт 11, то есть групповое, то есть группу.
So from the point of view, juridical point of view, this the question would be translated to your oh gosh, what is статья to this particular legislation? Yeah, well, to this law, to this paragraph, law 58.10, which is a sort of political crime, the greatest crime in Stalin's empire. There would be a different paragraph, 58.11, group crime, and this is a more severe crime.
Ответ Мандельштама просто великолепен.
Mandelstam gives an absolutely splendid answer.
Написанный мной пасквиль «Мы живем» — документ не личного восприятия отношения, а документ восприятия отношения социальной группы, а именно части старой интеллигенции.
Mandelstam says this document, this calumnious poem, is not an expression of my own views, but expression of entire strata of society, the old intelligentsia.
Старая интеллигенция, считающая себя носительницей и передатчицей в наше время ценностей прежних культур.
The old intelligentsia, that is still understanding itself or have the self-perception of being the bearer of the values, носители ценностей старой культуры, как там?
Прежних культур, старых культур.
Bearer of the values of the old culture.
В политическом отношении эта группа извлекла из опыта различных оппозиционных движений в прошлом привычку к искажающим современную действительность историческим аналогиям. Пополам, в политическом отношении эта группа извлекла из опыта различных оппозиционных движений в прошлом.
Это то, что Мандельштам говорит.
Да.
Okay, he says, so politically this group has made a conclusion. Oh gosh, again, can you say it again? I'm sorry. Еще раз.
Я буду сокращать тогда. Оставим это. В общем, да, что он поясняет, чем... оставим эту фразу. Следователь очень доволен, но он не унимается и спрашивает.
The interrogator was very happy, but he couldn't sort of restrain himself, and he wants to ask more.
Значит ли, я пересказываю уже своими словами, не цитирую, так стало быть, ваш пасквиль является оружием контрреволюционной борьбы для только что охарактеризованной вами группы и может быть использован для контрреволюционной борьбы?
Does this mean your self-characterization of sort of opposition? Can this calumnious text be used for counter-revolutionary fight, for counter-revolutionary struggle? Does this mean this?
Мандельштам явно польщен интересом столь симпатичного и любознательного собеседника и развивает свою мысль.
Mandelstam is obviously flattered by the interest of this pleasant young man and starts developing his ideas.
Я снова цитирую Мандельштама. В моем пасквиле я пошел по пути, ставшему традиционным старой русской литературе.
So in my calumnious poem, I followed the track of the old traditional track of old Russian literature.
И использовал способы упрощенного показа исторической ситуации, сведя ее к противопоставлению «страна» и «властелин».
And sort of boiled down the whole picture, to simplified it to an opposition, to an older position between the country and the ruler.
Несомненно, при этом снижен уровень исторического понимания охарактеризованной выше группы, которой принадлежу я сам.
Undoubtedly, the sort of level of historical perception of the group to which I belong has been a little bit simplified.
Но именно поэтому достигнута, вот как бы это хорошо перевести, плакатная выразительность пасквиля.
But this simplification was precisely what allowed to achieve this poster-like effect, poster-like expressiveness of this calumnious text.
Которое и делает его широко применимым орудием контрреволюционной борьбы.
Which is precisely makes it very useful and instrumental to be a tool of political counter-revolutionary struggle.
Ну, в общем, полная красота. Следователь записал это, ну, он формулировки тоже давал он, и приготовил к 28 мая обвинительное заключение.
So the interrogator was extremely satisfied. He made, by May 28th, he prepared his accusatory judgment.
Но 28 мая Мандельштама отвезли из Лубянской тюрьмы не в Бутырскую тюрьму для отправки куда-нибудь в ГУЛАГ, а на вокзал для отправки в ссылку в Чердынь.
But on the 28th of May, Mandelstam was not transferred from Lubyanskaya prison to Butyrskaya, which was a usual path for those sent to camps, but instead he was accompanied to the station to leave for the city of Cherdyn.
А оттуда уже, не будем выдаваться в подробности, он перебрался, скажем так, в Воронеж.
And from there, we're not going to go into every detail. He ended up in Voronezh, a city 100 kilometers away from Moscow.
И одним из тех, кому читал Мандельштам это стихотворение, был его друг и известный поэт и переводчик Бенедикт Лившиц.
Benedict Lifshitz. One of the people to whom Mandelstam read, это было в Воронеже?
Нет, читал он ему в Петербурге, в Ленинграде.
Well, one of the people to whom Mandelstam had read the poem, recited the poem, was Benedict Lifshitz, a poet and translator.
И его, Бенедикта Лившица, в октябре 1937 года арестовали.
In October 1937, Benedict Lifshitz was arrested.
И, как сказать, и шили ему, ну, как бы рисовали ему серьезную роль в заговоре писателей против Сталина, в заговоре писателей под руководством Тихонова и Эренбурга против Сталина.
And incriminated him.
Активную роль.
Incriminated him with an active role in a plot against Stalin in a group of writers with Tikhonov and Eremburg and himself, some contra-revolutionary plot against Stalin.
Ни Тихонова, ни Эренбурга ни тогда, ни позднее не арестовали.
So Tikhonov and Eremburg were never arrested, neither then nor later on.
А Лившиц был расстрелян, ну, примерно год спустя после своего ареста.
As opposed to Lifshitz, who was killed by a fire squad about a year after his arrest in October 1937.
11 января 1938 года на своем первом официальном допросе, перед которым его, конечно, безусловно, пытали и били.
Это о ком мы говорим?
О Лившице. 11 января 1938 года.
So on January 11th, 1938, during one of his interrogations, before which he was tortured and beaten.
Да, значит, Лившиц признавался в том, что Мандельштам читал ему вот эти контрреволюционные стихи.
Lifshitz acknowledged the fact that Mandelstam had read to him those counter-revolutionary poems, verses.
И что они, эти стихи, были очень, как бы, действенным, ну, как бы, мотиватором вот во всей контрреволюционной деятельности этого заговора против Сталина.
And that those verses were had a great impact in motivating him for this counter-revolutionary plot against Stalin.
Да. И в деле Мандельштам, кстати, тоже был фигурантом этого дела, но он был за Москвой, это дело было ленинградское, а Мандельштам числился за Москвой, и его по этому делу никак не допрашивали.
Мандельштам was also sort of co-related or co-conspirator in this particular in this particular crime that was investigated, but since Mandelstam was registered in Moscow and Lifshitz was in Leningrad, Mandelstam was not interrogated in connection with this particular accusation.
В деле Лившица фигурировали и грузинские поэты.
In this particular
case.
In case, thank you very much, дело, case, investigation. Now it's almost a Russian, but in this particular case, there were also some Georgian poets who were.
В частности, Тициан Табидзе.
In particular, Тициан Табидзе.
Грузинский поэт, который был хорошо знаком с Мандельштамом.
A major Georgian poet who was also acquainted with Mandelstam.
И ближайший друг Паола Яшвили, рассказом о котором я хочу закончить свое выступление, коротким рассказом о котором я хочу закончить свое выступление.
And he was a friend, Tabidze was a friend of Paolo Yashvili, another poet, and I'm going to wrap up my presentation by giving a short story about Yashvili.
К этому два маленьких как бы замечания в сторону. Первое замечание. Захар, вы один к одному, вы удивительно похожи на Паула Ишвили. Вот просто поразительно.
Thank you very much. Well, he just made two comments en passant. He said that I look very much like Paolo Ишвили. Thank you very much.
А второе, это у нас был с Захаром небольшой диспут насчет перевода слова «следователь». И, первый вариант был инквизитор, а не интеррогейтор. И я поэтому все-таки хотел бы инквизитора немножко привлечь к этому сообщению, потому что я сейчас расскажу чуть-чуть о Ишвили и Лаврентии Берии.
So he mentioned also another thing. We had a little dispute because I had translated the title of his presentation as a conversation with the Inquisitor, making him sort of as a great Inquisitor. And Pavel insisted that this is the banality of evil. The guy is a real interrogator. But as an homage to my mistranslation, he wants to give this little anecdote about Ишвили's connection to Lavrenti Beria, famous henchman of Stalin.
Тициан Табидзе и Паоло Ишвили были больше, чем братья. Они были совершенно поэты и друзья, поэты группы «Голубые роги», которых нельзя было представить отдельно друг от друга.
So Tizian Tabidze and Paolo Ишвили, these two Georgian poets, they were more than brothers, the part of the same group, and unimaginable in separation from one another.
Оба они погибли в конце 1937 года, но вот как они погибли.
Both perished at the end of 1937, but the question is how.
Паоло Ишвили вызвал к себе Берия. Это был не допрос, это был как бы, если угодно, это был такой частный визит и приглашение. Да, они жили по соседству. Берия пригласил к себе Паоло Ишвили домой.
It happens that Beria, who lived close by in Tbilisi, invited Ишвили to his house. This wasn't an interrogation, was not supposed to be. It was just an invitation to visit his home.
21 июля 1937 года.
Which happened on the 21st of July 1937.
И потребовал от Ишвили показания на Тициана Табидзе, разоблачение Тициана Табидзе как врага народа.
And demanded from Ишвили some damning information on Tabidze, some damning information which would reveal him as the enemy of the people.
Ответом Паола Ишвили на это предложение был выстрел из охотничьего ружья, было самоубийство, он застрелился на завтра, 22 числа.
So the answer to this proposal was shot from a hunter's gun. The day after this conversation, Ишвили shot himself, committed a suicide.
Когда арестовали Тициана Табидзе, а это произошло, сейчас скажу, 10 октября 1937 года,
So on the 10th of October 1937, they arrested Tizian Tabidze.
От него требовали дать показания против Паола Ишвили.
They demanded him to implicate Paolo Ишвили, who was already dead.
Нет, который уже был похоронен. Да, Тициан на это не пошел, и 15 декабря 1937 года Тициана расстреляли. 16 декабря Тициана расстреляли.
Tizian didn't agree, didn't bound to this pressure, and on the 15th of December, 16th of December 37, they shot him.
Конечно, у Тициана Табидзе были следователи.
Tizian Tabidze, of course, had his own interrogators.
Но согласитесь, что и Паоло Ишвили, и Тициан Табидзе имели дело с некой ипостасью великого инквизитора.
Pavel argues that both Tizian Tabidze and Paolo Ioshvili had to do with, in one form or another, with some form of reincarnation of the great Inquisitor.
Да, вот, и, ну вот, таким образом, на этом я хочу закончить свое выступление.
Well, this is going to be the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. So, any questions? Who wants to ask first? Давай, Ellen.
Hi.
And then
we have in English an account of the personal arrest record, but we don't have, that I know of, we don't have any information about the interrogation, and I wanted you to talk about how it was that I assume you've discovered these files, and if we're talking about the 3 different arrests and interrogations, how large what does this represent in terms of sort of mass of documents?
Ellen, it's quite easy. You can take a look on it on our, for example, but not only there, on our website of Mandelstam Center. So these documents from the Central Archive of FSB are well known since 1991, when they were published, first of all, in the magazine Огонек, of course, in extractions, yes, in fragments. And after this, so it is a book, Слово и дело Осипа Мандельштама, my book. I have written this book, Слово и дело Осипа Мандельштама.
Слово и дело means the word and the case. So it's kind of double entendre.
Книга доносов, допросов и обвинительных заключений, подзаголовок.
The subtitle is the book of denunciations, interrogations, and accusatory statements.
Yes. So it exists such a book, and there in this book you can find all, even very small details of that what was possible to see in the acts itself. Of course, these acts itself are not the real picture of these interrogations, of this interrogation process. Well, it is the result of the work of the interrogator, how he managed to get it, if he have beaten somebody or not, if he had given him such a strange questions or not. It is another thing. So it is a result of his interrogator's work. But it is the only thing which we have. We don't have more. And of course, there are some other documents there. You can take a look, and fast all of the documents themselves are possible to see on this website.
Okay. Well, later maybe I'll, in an email when I'll distribute the recordings of this, I will also distribute the link to your site.
But we have to immediately have a project for this to be translated into English.
Yeah, that sounds
It
good.
makes sense. It makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, you're in charge of this. Now I give Lars. Lars wanted to say something.
Well, thank you, Pavel. And well, actually, I have exactly the same questions as Ellen. So thank you, Ellen, for putting those questions and proposing this translation. This was exactly what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, Lars is going to translate and Ellen is going to be the editor. Perfect. I love it.
I can make this task a little bit easier. While this book, what I have mentioned, is not available right now. It was published maybe 10 years ago. I can send it to you, the PDF. I should send it to Zahar, and he will send it to those who is interested. It's not a problem.
I mean, I just speak kind of emotionally that we were talking about the Brodsky trial transcript, and what you have told us, for those that haven't read your work, is so shocking and so incredible, of Mandelstrom's statement under interrogation, that I feel that if it's not soon enough for it to be published for a wider readership. So we'll figure something out.
With pleasure, I'm ready to be helpful.
Okay, Irena, would you like to say something? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. No. Okay.
I'm sorry. This is a comedy. What did you meet since you read other materials? How extraordinary is this confession of Mandelstam?
What is confession?
How extraordinary it is in that sense that it is not the usual confession, as I understand, in which this is done in the words that are dictated by the interrogator, like, yes, I do belong to a group of counter-revolution, that it was from him.
Of course, the words are from his interrogator, but he was forced to, not forced here, he was supposed to sign it, and he signed it. Well, it is the terminology not of Mandelstam. Mandelstam terminology you can see in his poem, but it is, of course, the terminology of interrogator and of this on this OGPU and KVD system from this point of view. But of course, it was very unique behavior. By the way, even the photo of Mandelstam, this arrest with this prison photo, is also just unique. I have never met. Yeah, yes, of course. Such a pose by anybody else. There are thousands of such photos, but the only one where you see Mandelstam as a little bit Napoleon is his. So it is really, everything is very unique, and such a poem addressed to Stalin is also not a usual behavior.
But he wrote, oh no, Alisa, you want, sorry, I don't want to.
No, go ahead.
Well, he wrote 2 poems.
He wrote some hundreds of poems.
Stalin. He wrote another poem.
Yes, there is also Ode. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Грифельная ода.
Нет, Ode to Stalin. This poem has
also wrote.
Mm-hmm. But it is a very complicated poem. It should be it should be not correct to understand it as Ode itself. It is a very complicated poem. By the way, this one which you have read is also not so simple as we can imagine. we have listened a couple of weeks ago the whole presentation of one of the colleagues where he tried to show how intensive is this poem connected with Babok of Dostoevsky, with Dostoevsky and his Babok, and analyzing by also separate words and phrases by Mandelstam. It is not only Pashochina.
There's a big controversy in Poland about this second ode.
That's usual for a good poetry, yes.
Okay, we'll come back to it. I'll follow up on this question, on Irena's question, but then now is Alisa wanted to say something.
Well, I had a question about how the Stalin epigram functions in Russia today. I noticed recently during one of the protests in Khabarovsk that, you know, the first line turns up on, I mean, talk about plakatная выразительность. I mean, this is turning up on plakate right now. And I wonder how this poem, if you could say something about how this poem functions in Russia now. Does it fit? Do you think that for most Russians, it feels like a fit to their current situation? What does it mean to put мы живем под собой не чужой страны on a plakat now?
И как будет случайно?
Incidentally.
And it is not incidentally that just this poem and just this verse, yeah, строчка, да, verse?
This line.
This line is used very, very, very often on different protest actions in Moscow, in Russia, probably also not in Russia, not only in Russia, but not only in Khabarovsk. So it is something like an epigraph for many people who, well, it expresses their feelings. They have lost the contact with their land, with their ground, and with their underground, and it is still alive. It is not, and it is not every time actual in the same level, but it is actual, and everything is
relevant.
It's thought and done for this, that it will stay actual.
Relevant, that it still stays relevant. But I remember that actually in his first years, ironically, well, Leszek yesterday told that Jaruzelski quoted none of it all the time. But I think, like at the beginning of his reign, of his rule, Putin claimed that this was because he was sort of the dissident or the reformer. At some point, he said that this was his favorite poem. I don't know whether you registered this, but maybe
I have never heard such lines from the.
Well, it was. Well, maybe you should Google it. Maybe it's a curiosity. But well, my question is sort of relates to what Irena was alluding to, the whole discussion of Miłosz, who would say that this sort of the second ode. Well, because we know that Brodsky, in a way, read it similar to, as you are suggesting, to Stalin, and said, I wouldn't have punished Mandelstam for the first poem, but for the second poem, I would have punished him because he got much closer to Stalin and was sort of attacking him in a strange ways. Whereas Miłosz had an absolutely opposite reaction. He said, no Polish poet would descend to such a servility and, bow down before the power. So is that how I interpret? So how do you see it? Or is it correct how I interpreted Miłosz, Irena?
Yeah, but you have to add that then later on Miłosz wrote 2 odes, one to Lech Wałęsa and one to the Pope.
And he bowed
So
down.
he I mean, he was not in such dire condition like Mandelstam, but nevertheless, yeah, he really interpreted it. And there was a huge defense of Mandelstam against Miłosz. Huge defense in various newspapers and so on.
I know this polemic.
Yeah.
From Adam Pomorsky and from other, my friends.
Lyman, you know, the Russians and the
yes.
Poles.
Okay, it is. We don't need to continue this polemic right now here. Of course, I have arguments to defend Osip Mandelstam.
But it seems that Nadezhda Mandelstam was not fond of this poem. Is that correct?
She was not, yes, that's true. She wanted to get very, very simple and very, very clear lines. And it was a much more complicated case. I mean, concerning the faith of Mandelstam, not his poetics. And she didn't commented this poem. She would prefer that this ode should not exist. But it was a mistake. She was not right.
Even Nadezhda Mandelstam can be wrong sometimes. Anyone wants to say from the audience, from the participants, any questions? Because we're sort of, it's getting late in some parts of the world. Maybe we should start wrapping up and save some energy for tomorrow. We'll squeeze, we'll not squeeze. I'm also presenting. I make myself small, and also we have Alexandra Smith, who is not going to be there, but she'll send us a pre-recorded presentation, which will allow us to stick to the schedule and also reduce the time for discussions. So it allows us to, for Alisa to present, and you'll choose your time.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question.
Go for it, Lars.
Yes, Alisa. So Alisa will be first tomorrow. Alisa will start.
Well, yeah. Why not? Yeah, we'll decide on it. I'll ask.
You should make a choice, maybe, because in that way people can make sure that they are there for you. Yes.
Let's start with Alisa then.
That's 6 a.m. for me though.
Yeah, no, it's no good. So let's you choose your time. I'm giving you free rein.
Well,
you want to be in the second session? Start the second session, or?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ellen, are you okay with sort of being moved around coming after Alisa, or being in the first session maybe? Ellen.
I'm happy to go after Alisa.
Okay, she's happy to go after Alisa. Wonderful.
So what time? What could you tell me what the order of speakers is then? Sorry.
Well, there's only Ghassan Gusenov and my humble self, and Alexandra Smith has sent her pre-recorded presentation. This is the new. So the first session will be shorter, and that's why I was suggesting maybe Ellen wants to jump in and to be in the first session. So
Or I could go after you maybe in the first.
Yeah. If you can go after me, and then we have this little break, and we have Alisa.
No, I think. Sorry, I think you should stick to the schedule, and session 4 starts at 3 o'clock. Session 5 at 5:15.
Yes, absolutely.
And with Ellen, Alisa and Ellen, I think Ellen should conclude.
Okay, we'll figure this out, Lars. But I think we'll figure this out. We'll let you know. I think it would be better if Ellen spoke in the first session, because we'll have more time, and we don't want to rush people towards the end.
We could talk about that after. We don't have to talk about it as a group.
Yeah. Oh, okay. There's some guests who have been very faithfully with us all the time, like I see Carmen or other people. Anyone from the audience wants to say something?
I just want to say I really enjoyed it, and as someone who doesn't have much experience with the Polish or Russian literature, because I'm studying it right now, it was amazing to hear from people who actually know the field very well and explain it in that way. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here. Okay, anybody else wants to say before we call it a day? Say something. Leszek is frozen, or he's speaking to Dorota. Unmute yourself.
No, it's okay. Tomorrow, you ask me about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or, yeah. It's okay.
Okay.
I will be.
Okay.
I will be in the session for 4 sessions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for everyone for making it happen, and then we'll reconvene tomorrow.
Thank you, Zach. It's been really great so far.
Yeah. No, I'm very happy the way it has worked out. I'm a warrior. Was worrying all the time with them. There was no reason to be worried about. Okay. So I don't know, maybe we should listen to Lars and stick to the schedule. I wouldn't be so militaristic about it, because if we have about tomorrow, but what do you think, Alan?
Let me think about it for a minute.
Yeah, you think about it for a minute, you write to me.
Okay. I'm thinking about Mandelstam being interrogated, and I can't.
Yeah. You don't want to be interrogated yourself.
All right. Okay, bye.
Okay, goodbye. Do widzenia. Dobranoc. Cześć. Vises.
Cześć.
Gunat. Buonanotte. Auf Wiedersehen.
Leszek, dziękuję.
Dziękuję, Leszek. Fortinbras.
Okay, ja dziękuję.
Okay. Thank you, Jan. You didn't speak, but we appreciated your unmuted. We appreciated.
Dzień dobry.
Dzień dobry. A ty znasz Jana?
Tak mi się wydaje.
Yeah. Unmute yourself, Jan. Unmute. You have to.
Sorry. Now it's okay?
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry for being late, but
No
I enjoyed the last part, and I'm very glad to see some of nice faces I know and some of nice faces I didn't know so far.
Okay. Wonderful. On this note, I call the session ended. Dobranoc. Do widzenia. Do jutra. Bye-bye.